Gersha Phillips, costume designer for Star Trek Discovery. 10 years before Spock, Kirk, and the Enterprise USS Discovery discovers new worlds and life forms as one Starfleet officer learns to understand all things alien. Gersha, you've been with Star Trek Discovery since the beginning. We're into season 3 for this. I know you're already working on season 4, but for season 3, what was your approach going into this season with the costumes and evolving them maybe from what we had seen in the first 2 seasons?
Well, as we start season 3, we jump ahead 1,000 years into the future. So that sort of created an interesting set of dynamics to go from. Having already been 200 and something years in the future with the start of Star Trek, I felt that we were already pushing our look forward as much as we could. So that the idea of moving it now 1,000 years fast, that was just really daunting. And at first I was actually kind of paralyzed. I actually didn't know what to do or how to start. Every time I was trying to put together notes for my illustrator, I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do here. But I kind of went back to what I started with in the beginning. Like when I started season 3, one of my things I was like, you shouldn't see how things are made. You shouldn't see the sewing. You shouldn't see some of those characteristics because, technically, we should be looking at something where clothing is printed or replicated or however it's made. It will be made in this different way in the future. So in 1,000 years, I was like, well, now I can finally use that idea that I started with before, because when I started that one, the producers and director, they wanted to see the stitching, they wanted to see the work and so on, and a bit more detail in the costumes in that sense. So they wanted top stitching and all of those things. So we brought that back in. So then I was like, okay, well now this time I'm 1,000 years in the future, I can bring this sort of cleaner look into what I'm doing. So that's how, that's what we started. We went back to that, and it's a lot of bonding and other sorts of fabrication techniques that we used.
That's really great. I was going to say, how do you even do that? But it's definitely noticeable. I felt like watching it, you could see the difference between like the costumes and so working. Yeah, it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. The other thing I was like is that the costumes are they're not a total shock for anybody who's maybe watched Star Trek over the last like 50 years, but they're getting a lot of action, right? Like there's a lot of physicality with them, and they need to withstand scrutiny. They're not just standing there, and your characters are moving around and getting wet and getting dirty, even within the visual effects and stuff. I guess, can you talk about like balancing creating the look of like the futuristic Star Trek costumes with like the need for them to actually work, I guess, as clothes and stuff?
No, it's a good thing to ask because, for us, it's one thing to build a great costume that somebody can wear and they look great standing there, but we have to think about sitting on the bridge and then all these other things that they possibly may be doing. So, there's a lot of thought and effort that goes into that in terms of how we add stretch panels and do extra little bits and bobs for everybody, depending on who it's for and what we're doing, et cetera. Especially for the aliens sometimes, because they're in full prosthetics, they've got like their hands covered and all of this stuff, and then trying to create a costume that allows them to move and be able to function during the day. It's different for each person, but it is something that we really have to take into consideration. So like I said, we use a lot of stretch panels. We may have to put padding and different things underneath in terms of, especially for stunts and things like that. And also we'll make multiples. So there'll be, even in some cases, I remember for Anson, we used to have a standing jacket and a sitting jacket just so that he could, when he stood, he wore the specific jacket that did a certain thing. And when he sat, we had to make it shorter so that when he sat down, it wouldn't wrinkle in the front because, everybody was obsessed with wrinkles. So we were trying to get things to sit as smoothly as possible. So, a lot of those things have to be taken into consideration. So yeah, it's an ongoing journey, I have to say, with that, trying to make all that work out.
And then also, like, how do you balance, the visual effects with the costumes, or is there any consideration for that as well? Like, are you knowing that it's going to be in the maybe, and it does, I mean, obviously you're on sets and stuff, and the show looks like it is on a set, but like in the visual effects environments, I guess, like, how do you make sure the costumes aren't getting like swallowed up by what the computer is going to create, I guess, later?
Usually, ideally, they scan our costumes. Like they use one of those rigs with the 300 and some cameras that takes a 360 of them, and then they create like the avatar. And so, I don't really have to worry about that much. I will this year because we're, using a new technology that has been on another show that she'll, I don't know if I can mention it. Anyway, I'll say it. The Mandalorian, they, this idea of the air wall. So we have that in this season. So that's a new thing to play with in terms of, understanding what your costumes do in that environment, etc. But so, predominantly speaking, we don't have to worry about it too much. There has been the occasional costume that we spent, I don't know, I'm going to say weeks building, and then it was completely replaced by VisFX. It's an interesting journey, but and not something that we like very often at all. But it has happened to us a couple times now, and we're betting on different ones that we do, because when you read the description, you're like, I don't know if I can make that costume. It does sound like a VisFX. And there was one in particular I'm thinking about from season 2, and I had the illustrator draw, and I was like, yeah, that's a VisFX costume, because even when you draw it, it's like it's something you can't build. And they wanted us to build it, and we went through the whole process of building it. It was called a pavan, and then when they shot, when it was filmed, they ended up having it as a full VFX costume. So it was kind of funny. I actually, when we started, that was actually one of my pitches to everybody. I was like, well, I think for the 32nd century, everybody's going to be at home, and they'll just have avatars of themselves go forward. It's almost like what we're doing, really, when you think about, Zoom now and all communicating in this way. But like you would have, there's this idea that I've read about, that you would have your body would, it's called, like, they project clothing onto your body as opposed to actually wearing the clothing. And I feel, that was one of the things I was thinking about a lot. And I was like, well, maybe the costumes are all VisFX. You know what I mean? But there's no more. I do think eventually in sci-fi there's going to be a version of that will have to take place, where it is more of an avatar. I mean, it is, I guess, when I think about that, I'm thinking of Avatar, because they are on that show. So yeah.
I was also thinking of Cher Horowitz's closet in Clueless. She has the computer in it. It goes
oh,
on,
exactly.
But that was in the 90s.
Yeah.
I wanted the other costumes I want to talk about in season 3, especially, was the Mirror Universe costumes, and they're so cool. And like, I know you kind of like did a lot of work creating new looks for that this season.
Yeah.
I guess, can you talk about, like, getting, doing that? I guess, how did you go about like creating those looks?
When we did the first Mirror Universe, we felt we did a pretty good job. We were all very excited about it, but the idea of getting to recreate it and do it better was just really awesome and tempting and very, very exciting for us all. So we knew the things that we wanted to fix back then that we weren't able to do because of time and money. So one of the things we did was a lot more 3D printing. Like our whole chest, all the chest plates were 3D printed. We printed, I can't remember how many different sizes that we made, but we made like about 3 or 4 sizes for everybody, and a special one for Michelle Yeoh. And then the overlays are 3D printed. So basically what we do is we come up with a graphic design, we send it to a 3D modeler, they put it into a 3D form, and then we print that out in some sort of plastic material, and then we take that and mold that in our shop. And from the molded bits, we can run many different many different runs of them, so that we can make, it's like mass producing them. Basically, it allows us to mass produce them as opposed to 3D printing them all. And we get to do it in a great pliable material that can bend and move and do all kinds of different things. So one of the great things about that was the lattice work this time that goes on top of the chest plates, we were able to do in a more 3D version. So they had like beveled edges, and just, I don't know, it just looked a lot cooler and cleaner to us. I feel like everybody was extremely excited. Anybody that was with us in season 1 and got to go on that journey through it was very excited and happy with the result. And then also, Michelle's character, this time we're doing it from Michelle's perspective. So it was kind of nice to do it slightly differently, from that as well. Because we were in, last time we were in Burnham's perspective, and Burnham was looking at, like something that was horrific and awful. This time, we're in Michelle's version of it, and she's looking at it as, trying to understand why she doesn't like it. And she's also had that, because she's been with them on Discovery. So she's looking at it slightly from that point of view as well. So it's really interesting to take that point of view of her going back and, experiencing who she should be but doesn't want to be now because she's had these other experiences. So it was an interesting perspective, and it allowed us to have a little shift with it and play with it a bit. And we started with that really cool performance piece that we had where we would the performers were on silks, which was really cool. I'd never done that before either. And when you hear silks, you think it's something really light and dainty, but silks are these nylon ropes that can rip apart anything and your skin and everything. So we had to layer up. The performers were wearing double suits and couldn't have anything hanging on them. So it was interesting to take her costume in particular and make a replica of her with the same, a smaller version of her crown, and then have that be part of that performance piece, which it was a really cool and interesting piece as well. But yeah, I mean, it was just in general though, I feel like, you know, getting to do it again and revisit it and from this different perspective, and also just that whole idea of getting to do it again was just really great, I have to say. It was a sort of like a little bit of a dream come true, because you don't know you get to do that. You don't get to do that very often, so it's just really lovely, I have to say.
It's great. Gersha Phillips, thank you so much. Star Trek Discovery on Paramount Plus now. Thank you. And stay tuned. Stay tuned. We'll talk to you in a little bit.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.